Once there was a young armadillo named Arthur who lived in a barn in Texas with his Aunt Helen. Arthur and Helen shared the barn with a family of bats and a commune of rats. One of the bats, Hank, was Arthur's best friend. Most of the rats were either too young or too old to hang out with Arthur and Hank, except for the angry big-mouth rat named Dawn. Nobody really liked Dawn because she could never make up her mind. Whenever Arthur or Hank or her other friends asked her if she would like to go out with them, she would only answer that she didn't know. She said neither yes nor no. She would always shirk when it came to making a choice. One day Arthur got tired of Dawn's indecision and told her that no one was going to care for her if she carried on like this. Arthur told her that she had no more mind than a blade of grass. One rainy day, the bats heard a great noise in the loft. The pine rafters were all rotten, so that the barn was rather unsafe. At last the joists gave way and fell to the ground. The walls shook and all the bats' hair stood on end with fear and horror. Hank, the captain of the bats, decided this wouldn't do, and he sent out scouts to search for a new home. Within 5 hours, the 10 scouts came back with good news. Hank flew down to tell everybody that the scouts had found a stone house where there would be room and board for everyone. There was also a kindly horse named Nellie, a cow, a calf, and a garden with an elm tree. The bats flew down from the rafters to direct the move, but Hank put Arthur in charge of directing the smaller animals. Everyone crawled out of their little houses and stood on the floor in a long line. Just when they were about finished lining up, Arthur saw Dawn. He coarsely ordered her to stop and, of course, asked if she was coming. Dawn told Arthur that she wasn't certain. She told him that she was undaunted because no one really knew if the roof might come down yet or not. Arthur couldn't wait for Dawn to join them, so he made an about face and just marched everyone else off, leaving Dawn behind. Dawn stood and watched them hurry away. She thought to herself that she might go tomorrow or maybe not. She didn't know. It was so nice and snug there in the barn. That night there was a big crash. In the morning some men, with some boys and girls, rode up and looked at the barn. One of them moved aboard and he saw a young big-mouthed rat, quite dead, half in and half out of his hole. Thus the shirker got her due.
It's always a pleasure to old folks scare youngins.
Oh.
What are you doing?
Okay.
So, whenever you're ready, this is Aaron James telling us Arthuring for us. Go ahead.
Howdy. My name's Arthur, and I'm going to tell you a story about why Texans don't shirk on making a choice. Once, when I was a young armadillo, I lived in a barn with Texas with my Aunt Helen, who's another armadillo, and she smells worse than I do, and Hank the bat, who, he's nice enough, but, I mean, he's still just a flying rodent, and Dawn the big mouth rat, and, well, that about says it right there. There's a big mouth rat. There's just nothing, yeah, okay, anyways. Well, speaking of this Dawn, this big mouth rat, nobody really liked Dawn because she smelled really bad. And, you know, I mean, who likes a rat? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, come on, folks. It's a rat. But the reason, I mean, we all kind of put up with her, though, because I'm not taking too long.
We're checking to make sure that the tape wasn't running out.
Okay, well, the reason that nobody really did like Dawn, because, I mean, we all lived in the same barn, and when you live in the same barn with folks, I mean, regardless of how they look, you got to learn to live with them. You know, get along with them. You want me to be a Texan.
You're doing great.
Well, the reason we didn't like Dawn that much, or at least having to deal with her, because, well, let's be honest, we didn't like Dawn, but we had to deal with her. So the reason we didn't like dealing with her was because she'd shirk on making a choice. Now, what that means exactly, shirking, I'm not too familiar. What the hell is shirking?
Shirk your responsibilities.
To avoid the duty of.
Yeah.
To avoid something that you are responsible for.
But I'm not getting into a philosophical conversation about the nature of shirking. She'd shirk making a choice, which I guess means, you know, she really just wouldn't make it. She'd just kind of sit there like a bump on a log. One day I got tired of Dawn's indecision, and I said to her, "Hey, Dawn, how come you never say yes or no and you always say, I don't know, maybe?" Yeah. One rainy day, the bats heard a great noise in the loft. And this huge norther came out and was just racking the barn, and it was all shuddering and shaking, and, you know, like, the winds were howling, and it sounded like Old Testament stuff. Yep, like you hear about in church on Sunday. And the barn started to creak and shift. And Hank, who, yes, now I remember, the bat fellow I was talking about earlier, Hank, he sent out scouts to look for a new home. Yep, and flew around all in the middle of the night looking for a home. You know, and within 5 hours, the 10 scouts came back with good news. Hank flew down to tell everybody. Hank said it was a new barn. It had a kind of horse in it. This real nice fellow of a horse. We didn't have a horse in our barn, so we were kind of looking forward to finally getting a horse. There was a garden outside with an elm tree, which is odd because you don't see elm trees in Texas very often. I mean, you'd think it would have been, you know, like a pecan tree or, you know, like cotton tree or something, but there are cotton trees. They're in North Texas, boy. Don't you question me. They have this pollen that comes down, and it's all white and stringy like cotton, and you're real allergic to it, and it's gross. And then there's cedar trees, too, but elm trees, some carpetbagger must have brought that down with him after the Civil War. Anyways, there was a nice garden with an elm tree. And there were other features of the new home, which I'm not going to mention.
You just put your face in Arthur's butt.
I don't really care. Oh, God. This is so silly. Okay. And other features of their new home. I don't know why I think that's so funny. Okay. I'm going to read the rest of this before I go on.
Does Arthur look good on camera?
Arthur looks fabulous.
The bats flew down from the rafters and started to directed the move. No, I'm just pointing out that there should not be a D on the end of ED on the end of direct.
Oops. There's a pronoun problem in the original story that I keep forgetting to fix too.
The her and his, yeah. It's. I noticed that. I was like,
I know. I saw you get tripped up. Luke got tripped up on it too, and I thought I'd fixed it, but I hadn't. Oh well.
okay. The bats flew down from the rafters and started to direct the move. And so we lined everybody up, all the little rats and all the other little armadillos. And then the bats, I guess, were swooping about overhead. And they directed everybody, and everybody marched over to the new barn. And I ran into Dawn, and I asked her, "What you doing? Aren't you coming?" I said, "What you doing?" And she said, "I'm not certain." And she was undaunted by this big barn. You might want to change the language. I'm sorry. Anyways, "I'm not certain," Dawn said. And she wasn't afraid of this big barn. "The roof might not come down yet." I said, "Well, hell. I mean, it's going to come down eventually. I mean, nothing lasts forever." And she decided that she just wanted to say, I mean, she'd just been in that barn her whole life. You know, I guess I can understand it. I mean, change. I mean, you know, God knows what kind of person, you know, there might be other rats at the new barn that pick on her and make fun of her jeans. But, you know, so, you know, I left her. I figured she'd be fine and she'd catch up. But later we found out that in the middle of the night, the barn collapsed. And crushed poor old Dawn, just flat as a pancake. Yeah, and I wouldn't laugh at old Dawn dying. What is wrong with you, girl? Where are you from? You just laughing at people getting crushed by barns? You know, did I fail to mention later on my Aunt Helen was kicked in the head by the horse at the new barn? You think that's funny? I don't. So anyways, the farmer that owned the barn found it all collapsed, and when he was kicking it around, he found that little strangled, flattened rat underneath a big cross beam. That's what you call them things, yeah. Cross beam. And thus that little shirking rat got her due. And that's why we Texans don't shirk when it comes time to make a choice.
All right, thank you very much.